Pedro Valdez's flagship, the Rosario, was twice in collision with a consort, with disastrous results. Her bowsprit was carried away, and her foremast went over the side, the strain on the rigging bringing down the main topmast with it. When the English drew off just before sundown, Valdez was busy cutting away the wreckage. Medina Sidonia shortened sail to enable the rearward ships to rejoin, and then held his course up the channel. Valdez sent a request to him that a ship should be detailed to tow the disabled Rosario, which otherwise could not keep up with the fleet. It is generally stated that Medina Sidonia took no notice of the message, and abandoned Valdez to his fate, but in his narrative the Duke reports to King Philip that he personally endeavoured to assist the disabled Rosario, and succeeded in removing the wounded from her, only failing to save her, owing to the heavy sea and darkness of the weather. The English do not seem to have been troubled by the weather, and it cannot have been very bad, or the wounded could not have been taken by boats from Oquendo's ship. Evidently no great effort was made to succour the Rosario, and the ships detailed for the work did not like to lie in isolation so near the English during the night. The impression in the Armada certainly was that the gallant Valdez had been shamefully abandoned by the admiral. Before sunset a council of war had been held by Howard on board the Ark. It was decided to follow up the Armada through the short summer night. To Drake, in the Revenge, was assigned the task of keeping touch with them, and guiding the pursuit by displaying a large stern lantern on his ship. After dark Howard lost sight of the lantern, and then thought he had picked it up again, but at daylight he found that he must have steered by a light in the Armada, for as day broke he lay with only a few ships, perilously near the main body of the enemy. Drake explained that in the darkness he had thought that some ships of the enemy were turning back, and had followed them. He had certainly failed in his important duty, and there was a suspicion that the veteran buccaneer was really manoeuvring to make sure of a prize, for at sunrise his ship, the Revenge, lay near the crippled Rosario, which had been deserted by her consorts. He summoned Valdez to surrender, and the Spaniard, with his ship helpless and menaced by the main English fleet, hauled down his flag. The huge galleon was towed into Weymouth, the first prize of the campaign. Howard had drawn off the enemy, helped to secure the Rosario, and rallied his own fleet, which had straggled during the night. This day, Monday, the 1st of August, or the 22nd of July, old style, there was no fighting, the Armada working slowly up channel, followed by the English out of cannon range. Medina Sidonia formed a rearguard of 40 galleons and 3 galleasses, in all 43 of the best ships with the Armada to confront the enemy, so that there should be no hindrance to our joining with the Duke of Parma, and the Duke with the rest of the Armada should go in the van, so that the whole fleet was divided into only 2 squadrons, Don Alonso de Leyva taking the rear under his charge. At 11 a.m. Oquendo's ship was reported to be sinking. Her crew and "the King's money" were taken out of her, and the Santa Ana, largest but one of King Philip's galleons, disappeared under the grey-green waves of the Channel. In 2 days the Armada had lost 2 of its divisional flagships. Howard had been reinforced during the day from the western Channel ports. After the free expenditure of powder and shot the previous day, his magazines were half empty, and he husbanded his ammunition and followed up the Spaniards out of fighting range, writing to Portsmouth to have all ships there ready to join him. "We mean so to course the enemy," he added, "that they shall have no leisure to land." Seymour reported to the council from Dover that the Armada was well up the Channel, and he feared they might seize the Isle of Wight. He asked for powder and shot for his squadron, "whereof we have want in our fleet, and which I have divers times given knowledge thereof." All the English commanders felt this want of ammunition and supplies. The Queen's parsimony was endangering the country. On the Tuesday morning, 2nd of August, 23rd of July, old style, the Armada was off Portland. In the night the wind had gone round to the northeast, and as the sun rose Howard's fleet was seen to be between the Spaniards and the land and to the leeward of them. Medina Sidonia was no sailor, but his veteran commander saw the chance the shift of wind had given them. The Armada turned from its course up channel, and on the starboard tack stood toward the English fleet, hoping in Spanish phrase to catch the enemy "between the sword and the wall." It was an anxious moment for Howard and his captains when the Armada came sweeping down on them, the galleasses in front pushing ahead with sail and oar, behind the long lines of galleons with the wind in the painted sails of their towering masts. It looked as if the Spaniards would soon be locked in close fight with the English squadron, with every advantage on the side of King Philip's floating castles. Led by the Ark, the English ships began to beat out to seaward with scant room for the maneuver. But just as the close fight seemed inevitable and the tall Regazzona had almost run the Ark aboard, and while both ships were wrapped in a fog of powder smoke, the wind suddenly shifted again, backing to the northward. Howard was now working out well from the land, and every moment improved the position. There was a heavy cannonade on both sides, but as the range lengthened, the advantage was with the better gunners of the English ships. The galleasses, led by the great Florencia, tried, with the help of their long oars, to fall on the English rear. The galleons tacked and made one more attempt to come to handstroke, but, writes Sidonia, all to little effect. The enemy avoided our attack by the lightness of their vessels. Good seamanship told. Howard's ships were soon in a position to resume the fighting loose tactics of the first battle, and the Spaniards knew that at this game they were the losers. So the Armada bore away, resuming its course up the channel, and the cannonade died down into dropping long shots, and then ceased, for Howard had no ammunition to spare. On Wednesday the two fleets crept slowly up channel, the English some 6 miles astern of the Armada. Once they closed up, and a few shots were exchanged with the galleasses in Recalde's rearguard. But Howard did not want to fight. He was only putting on a brag countenance, for he was woefully short of ammunition, and writing urgently for much-needed supplies. The wind had fallen, and in the afternoon some of the galleons were drifting along, heeled over by the shifting guns and stores to enable the carpenters slung over the sides to plug shot-holes near the waterline. On Thursday the fleets were off the Isle of Wight, and it was almost a calm, with occasional flaws of wind to help them on their way. Welcome reinforcements from Portsmouth joined Howard, and he received some ammunition. Soon after sunrise there was a sharp fight. The Santa Ana and a Portuguese galleon had fallen astern of the Armada, and Hawkins, in the Victory, supported by several other ships, attacked them. He had done considerable damage to the Santa Ana, and already reckoned her a prize, when the ever-ready De Leyva, with the great Rata and the galleasses, came to the rescue, and Hawkins reluctantly drew off. Howard, with the Ark and his nephew, Lord Thomas Howard, in the Golden Lion, had come up to cover the retirement of Hawkins. They became involved in a fight with the Spanish rearguard, and the Ark was damaged, according to one account, by a collision, but it seems more likely that her steering gear was temporarily put out of order by a chance shot. She fell behind her consorts, and lowered boats to tow her out of action. For the moment the wind was helping the Spaniards, and, led by Medina Sidonia himself, several galleons turned to attack the Ark. But the wind freshened and changed suddenly, and the English ships escaped from their dangerous position, and so the fight ended. On Friday it was almost a dead calm. It was a bright summer day, and from the hills of the Isle of Wight there was a wondrous spectacle of the two fleets drifting idly over miles of sea, with the sails flapping against the masts. On board the Ark, now repaired and again fit for action, there was a stately ceremony, the Admiral, in the Queen's name, conferring knighthood on Hawkins, Frobisher, and several other of the captains who had taken a leading part in the fighting. It was decided not to engage the enemy again till the fleets had reached the Straits of Dover. Shortness of ammunition was the reason for this decision. Medina Sidonia was anxious on the same score. He sent off a pilot boat to the Duke of Parma, asking him to send a supply of 4, 6, and 10-pound shot, because much of his ammunition had been wasted away in the several fights. The mention of such small weights shows with what light artillery most of the galleons were armed. He also asked Parma to send 40 light craft to join the Armada, to the end he might be able with them to close with the enemy, because our ships, being very heavy in comparison with the lightness of those of the enemy, it was impossible to come to handstroke with them. At sunset the wind freshened, and at daybreak on Saturday the English were seen following up closely, but there was no fighting, the Armada sailing with a fair wind, and the rear close up and in very good order. At 10 a.m. the French coast near Boulogne was in sight. At 4 in the afternoon the Armada was off Calais, and at 5 orders were given to anchor in Calais roads, 7 leagues from Dunkirk, or between Calais and Gravelines. The Spaniards noticed that some 36 ships had joined Howard's fleet, which anchored about a league away. The new arrivals were Seymour's and Winter's squadrons from Dover and the Downs. Medina Sidonia now believed that he had all but accomplished his task. English writers say that the enemy were disappointed and discouraged when they anchored off Calais, but there is no proof of this in contemporary Spanish accounts. Medina Sidonia thought it a success that he had got in touch with the Viceroy of the Netherlands.